Welcome to I was going to say the last day, but I guess it's only 2 days, of the Staple Independent Media Expo, which is honestly my favorite of the conventions here that I go to because it focuses so much on the creators and that people here care about the creators. And that's why it's a real honor to have you here. We are with Kazu Kibuishi. I just said a second. Kazu Kibuishi, and I'm so embarrassed because I was saying it just fine a few minutes ago.
Yeah. No, you're fine.
Regardless, Kazu, thank you for coming here.
Okay.
I was talking to you just a few minutes ago about the fact that you have your Amulet series, which is, according to Wikipedia, at least being optioned on Netflix.
It's like a little more than option because I'm also been hired as a producer and co-writer.
So we got some progress.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, I
Yeah,
want to hear more about that.
And we've been done with the script a few times, but then new people come in and they want to change things. So
believe me, I know how that works. Not in the Netflix zone, but other areas.
yeah. So that's what's happening right now.
Well, on that note, you've also done other things. You've been the editor and I guess the force behind things like Explorer and Flight, which promoted a lot of different creators. And you also have a series called Daisy Kutter, which I want to learn more about. So
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about your stuff and about what you have coming. And we will take questions from the audience. If you guys have questions, I say pop a hand up whenever you feel like it, and we'll get to you as soon as we get a second. I always find it's good to be informal like that, get the conversation going. Kazu, if you can start, tell me about yourself. How did you get into the creative sphere?
I just never got out of it. That's all. I just stayed in. I'm like, I think kids all do that.
That's beautiful.
Kids they're all creative. So we all started at the same place. We're all drawing together. We're making fun stuff. And so I usually turn around that question when people ask me when I started. I go, well, hey, when'd you stop?
That's honestly fair.
Right? So that's it. So because like as I go out to schools too, the older the kids get, when I ask the question like who's thinking about drawing and writing in here, when they're really young, every one of them wants to do it. And by the time I'm in college classes, then there's only a couple. And it just like whittles down as the years go on.
Yeah, as somebody who teaches high school, I've seen where like freshmen will come in with still a little bit of that happy, that idea of like loving cartoons and silly things. And then by the end of the year, they're like, no, I'm too old for that. But then I'll have seniors that are graduating. They're like, oh, I loved those cartoons. I missed those things. And they're kind of getting wistful already for it. So I love the idea of just not leaving that. That's very cool.
Yeah, I'm just the last kid out of the pool. So that's it.
That's
always the case.
Advice to everybody else, that's who you have to be now.
Yeah.
Talk to me about Flight first, because again, that's how I first encountered your influence, I guess.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
That came about because I was seeing a lot of storytellers that were not published or considered professional that were better than I felt, in my estimation, they were better than the professionals, but they thought they weren't pros. And I first saw when I saw Derek Kirkham's Small Stories Online. It was a webcomic he did called Same Difference. And I was like reading what Scott McCloud was doing online. And I just thought, these are better than the other comics, all the comics I'm reading. I think some of the premier comics are coming up online. So I was hanging out with a bunch of kids at Art Center. I had just graduated from UCSB. I was friends with Art Center students, and they were amazing on their own. Not comic artists, but they would go on to be filmmakers or storyboard artists or concept artists for major projects later. But these kids were really good, so I just kind of brought them all together, and I thought like, well, we could do something, a book that introduces storytelling art at a high level for people other than the small, like the small comic sphere. Like just someone, I just thought I could bring more people into comics, I think. And so Flight was a project for that.
Now, I was just saying a minute ago that I was thinking of it as being like a spotlight for indie creators, but you were saying you didn't see it that way. You were just saying right now, the professionals, the ones other people were seeing as professionals.
I saw that as the true mainstream. So this would be in 2003, 2004. 2004 is when Flight came out. So I was putting it together beginning in 02, 03. And I just thought the mainstream comics, as they call them, mainstream comics, they didn't feel mainstream to me. because none of my friends were reading them. I wasn't reading them anymore. And I was actually, in high school, I was offered work as a professional comic inker. But I was looking at the books and I just thought, I don't even want to read these. Like, I'd be working my butt off to make this comic look good, but I don't want to read it. And so I just thought, like, then that means people are going to just start leaving this room slowly. And they'll probably start reading manga. That's what I figured would happen. Because I was like, that's made for regular folks, just a reader.
I feel like
Not a
that's
fan.
very prescient, because I feel like, the 90s, they had all kinds of comics being published in the 90s, obviously, but it gets known for the excess of the superhero stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, since Flight's come out, really, there's been a lot more of a push towards, well, everything,
Yeah, because readers age out, and they age in. And I feel like if you try to stick with just one set of readers, there's the law of attrition is that eventually you will have no readers. And I feel like American comics just kept chasing the same group of people that they knew very well. They were just their friends, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it wasn't good for the industry, because they weren't inviting anybody else new in, namely kids.
Yeah.
Kids were not invited into comics all of a sudden.
I feel like that's something that I hear a lot from various creators saying that, our audience isn't getting any younger.
Uh-huh.
Do you think the solution to that is that variation and that kind of accepting of whimsy, I guess?
But yeah, I guess if there is a saying that the audience isn't getting any younger, I think that's not true. I mean, the audience can be getting younger as long as they're still kids. Like, there are still kids. There will be new readers. Like, every year there's like an entire generation of new readers that are learning to read. And something I didn't know I was doing when I got into it was that I was teaching people to read. And the comics were a bridge for someone who is having a hard time looking at a wall of text, trying to figure out what that wall of text actually means. They don't see what's on the other side of that wall. Like, they don't know why they need to climb it. But if they see the drawings and you go, that's interesting, what is that? Like, what I'm seeing right here, that spaceship and the robots and stuff, oh, there are words that are gonna help me understand and decipher what this cool thing is, then it's like a puzzle they can unlock.
I like that you worded it that way, because I've seen a lot of people that have I've met a lot of people rather that tell me they have trouble visualizing it. Like, you'll describe something really, fantastical, and they're like, okay, but I need to see it to get it. I could see that kind of helping bridge that gap. I like that. Not the way I thought of it before.
Yeah, it's just, if you have a really good teacher, I had a really great English teacher who showed me why I wanted to read classic literature. And I fell in love with John Steinbeck and Ernest Hemingway and H.G. Wells. Those are my three favorite writers. And I realized, even the old stuff, some of the old stuff is even better than new stuff,
Yeah.
But it requires somebody to get me there. And when that person isn't there, sometimes the kids are just kind of adrift, they're on their own. It's the books that have to do that. A graphic novel can just do that. It's baked into it because you're showing them something that they can then unlock,
Love that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to continue talking to Mr. Kibuishi about his career and other things that we have coming up very soon. But I do want to take questions from the audience whenever you guys have them, and I think we have one right now already.
Yeah. Actually, there is a medical condition or neurological condition that a lot of people do have, actually, that is basically you can't see images when you imagine. It's called aphantasia. Actually, so a lot of artists have aphantasia, actually.
Yeah, I've heard that, and I've heard the idea that a lot of artists will kind of process through it in their art, which I think is kind of
Interesting, yeah. I mean, and obviously dyslexia is something that Amulet is often used to help treat. And then there's a right here, and then over there. Yeah.
Okay, well, first I have a statement is, I teach mid-grade, I teach 6th through 8th.
Yeah.
And your books are particularly popular in my classroom with my ELL students.
Yeah.
English language learners,
Sorry.
for non-teachers.
It's non-teachers, sorry. And so it's a perfect to get them out of their shell and into reading, because all they see is this big wall of books in English.
Yeah.
If they see picture books,
Yeah.
And then I have a lot of graphic novels, but yours is by far the most taken from my classroom library. that being said, you have this span where you have people aging through your books.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans in the future to write anything that might grow with some of those readers?
Oh, immediately. Actually, the next book I'm doing is just a little bit older. You know, I don't know where graphics is going to put it, but you know, it's probably a little more teen than it is middle grade. You know, so it's it'll be cool if people like. It's basically like if you just fuse Seventh Samurai and Army of Darkness, I think that's kind of what it's gonna go. Yeah. So if you like Sam Raimi and Akira Kurosawa.
People that I'm sending my children to.
Speaking entirely my language.
Yeah. It's gonna be like a really nerdy, cool, awesome 80s like midnight movie fantasy thing. Yeah.
I think we have a question over here, and then we'll come back.
This dovetails with that really nicely. You talked about
Thank you.
You talked about kids not being invited into comics, and your work is very kid friendly.
Mm-hmm.
Was there, when you started out, like a conscious awareness in your mind, like, oh, I know what audience I want to write for, or did you feel drawn to write for a specific audience at the time, or was that just kind of?
No,
Okay.
no. This is just me. Like it was my curse. I would try to make things that were cool for us teenagers and 20-something-year-olds, and the people would look at it and go, "Oh, that's so cute." I'm like, "No, it's supposed to be cool. Like, why is it so cute?" They're like, "It's the way you draw. It's like so friendly." I go, "All right." Like, even if I did this monster, they're like, "Yeah, it's a cute monster." I'm like, so I have like that Steven Spielberg thing. Like, and I love like even I know he understands like what it is. Like he has this ability to make people feel safe in the way that he delivers information. That he can take you into Saving Private Ryan, and he's probably the only filmmaker that can get an R rating on a movie like that. I think nearly anybody else would have to cut it. You know.
Has that changed for you, having had that audience?
So what I did instead was I just decided to just lean into it. Like, when I make an Amulet book, I don't think, oh, other kids' books. I think, how do I get the movie Aliens into a school? Like, how do I get Die Hard in here? Like, because that's what I would want to see, you know? In fact, my kids have been watching Home Alone a lot recently, and I feel like Home Alone does that. That is a home invasion defense, like hardcore, like Straw Dogs defense movie, and very violent, actually, very violent movie. The poor robbers are like completely eviscerated by
People
this kid.
forget how violent that
It
is.
is super
You go back and
violent.
watch it, you're like, oh.
And I'm watching my kids watch it, and they love it because it's so empowering. Because they're like, oh yeah, I could defend my house. It's like, Kevin, you know, and look at those knuckleheads. We're gonna take them out. And they're like, can we watch it again? I'm like, oh man, that's exactly how I felt when I saw Home Alone. So I was always entertained by those types of things. So I ended up making that kind of thing for the kids. And it's really just important to remember what we loved back then, like, and really put ourselves in their shoes and you know, not necessarily make it for our taste right now, but if you can remember what it was truly like as a kid, and not look at a kid as somebody else other than you, then I think, you know, it would be like this. It's like Dogman is like that. Like Dogman is basically RoboCop, you know? Yeah.
Question?
I just want to say before I ask my question, thank you for this book. It was one of the first comics I ever read. I actually haven't held it since like middle school when I first started reading comics, so it's a great honor to be
Oh, cool. Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for being here. But I just want to ask you, touched on it a little bit already, but Amulet clearly pulls from a lot of different influences, a lot of different stories, stuff that you clearly feel so
Yes.
passionate about. And yet at the same time, it's that George Lucas kind of Star Wars infusion where it comes through feeling completely original and all you. I was wondering how much of that are you consciously aware of? Clearly, that, like you were saying, some of it is, but like how much of it are you pulling on subconsciously, consciously? How much you look back on, you're like, oh wow, I didn't realize I was actually pulling from that, but then I was.
Right. Great question though too. Like you know, I think a lot of us like draw from the things that did entertain us, right? And I do that, but I actually make a conscious effort to study what those people studied. So, like, if I were to think about, George Lucas, like, I immediately think to, like, Jidaigeki movies. So we're talking about samurai movies made in the 50s and 60s, you know, by Kurosawa. So if you want to know how to make a George Lucas movie, this would be my formula. I would say go look at Flash Gordon comic strips, fuse that with Akira Kurosawa Jidaigeki samurai movies, and make everything sound like an F1 race. And now you will get Star Wars. Now, it's like seeing a chef make a meal. So then I look at those are the ingredients for him to get there. Now, if you take Star Wars and you try to make Star Wars, you are warming up leftovers, and people don't like it. It's like what's happened to what's happened to Star Wars right now. I think we're just seeing regurgitation of our memories of the thing, but not what actually made the thing, you know. So what I do is I study what my masters studied. So if you're like going into Bill Watterson, I would say make sure you look at Charles Schultz, but especially George Harriman, and read Crazy Cat. And if you look at that as an artist, you will start coming up with stuff that looks a lot like his work. I was interviewed by a lot of people about Bill Watterson's work as they compared my Copper comic to like Copper, the Boy and a Dog story. They compare it to
a little bit existential as well.
Yeah, and so there's some similarities, but I think I actually was not a huge fan of Bill Watterson's work. I was actually a big fan of Crazy Cat and Little Nemo's Slumberland. So I think Copper's actually closer to Little Nemo than Calvin and Hobbes.
I love that this is a rabbit hole people can go down, because I've talked to a lot of creators our age, and they're like, I was inspired by Calvin and Hobbes. And people from the Calvin and Hobbes generation, they were inspired by Pogo. And,
Sure.
and then Pogo's generation, they were inspired by Crazy Cat, and then Crazy Cat by Little Nemo. I almost said Finding Nemo. But the point is that, it's I like that, going through the inspirations to find it.
Yeah, I mean, we're all like chefs, right? Cooking meals. So you want to get the freshest ingredients that seem pure, like something different. And so one thing I do a lot of now is try to look way outside of my field for the ingredients, so that I can make an interesting meal that no one can unlock. They're like, well, how does he do that? Like, what is that? For example, Amulet 1, the opening scene is inspired by a filmmaker named Krzysztof Kieslowski. And he made some movies called the Three Colors Trilogy, and one of them, in blue, the opening scene is a really traumatic car accident. And then the way he films it, like the way, you don't even see the accident, but you feel the trauma of it. And it's important because the movie's about this lady overcoming the trauma of that. So I was inspired by that for a kid's book. And I found that to be interesting.
So I want to ask you more about that, but I want to remind again, if you have a question, I'll hand up and we'll get to you as soon as we can. So let's talk about your creation. Talk about Copper and the things that kind of led into Amulet preceded Amulet.
Yeah.
How do you have to change your mindset when you're going from, say, a world like this versus Copper versus Daisy Kutter, where you've got entirely different genres happening? Or is it just all the same to you?
No, they're all different. With Amulet, I am in my parent-child relationship, multi-generational educational space. I do think about it in those terms. Mm-hmm. Whereas like with Daisy Kutter, it's just I'm just like what can I nerd out on, and just have fun with. And whereas with Copper, it's way more introspective. It's like what difficult thing am I dealing with, like internally as just an individual, not as a group thing. It's just like a very solitary, more like a monk-like thing, So it's more of that, the subtext of it, the sense of it. In Amulet, it's a lot brighter. It's way more socially engaged, I guess, because I feel that that's what a school environment feels like. And so I think it feels safe for the kids then. When they read it, they feel like, oh, it's like we're hanging out, but now we got big robots and monsters and everything, and all the scary stuff becomes like something that they can process on in a comfortable environment.
I find it interesting because I feel like just comparing Amulet to Copper, for example, they feel like entirely different creators, and a lot of times creators feel like, well, I have to be, they recognize me for one thing, so I have to only do that style or that type of that wheelhouse essentially.
Yeah.
I guess you don't feel constrained by that.
I mean, I did constrain myself to Amulet for a long time. So I guess I did focus, for a while. But I guess I don't want to worry about what other people think of me. I just want to make the thing. And if it's interesting to me, that's enough. And then whatever happens, happens. I try not to control the end result.
All right, let's talk about the beginning.
Yeah.
How did Amulet take off for you?
It took a long time. I was like hyped up at the start, and I think I was considered a disappointment because the sales of Amulet 1 were really bad. Like when it was released, it took a long time for it to go through its first print run, which wasn't that much. Even my agent thought we were in trouble. But I told her, like, I'm not doing anything else, so I'll find a way. I'll like take jobs or whatever it is that just keep doing this, and I think it'll eventually work out. And even though there were some bestsellers in there, it wasn't until the 5th book, I think, around that time, where I felt like I'm actually making a living doing this, because I was doing a lot of other things at that point, like just other like the anthologies.
But was it something that you went into saying, I want this to be a long, sprawling series, or was it just like, oh, I have an idea that's just this?
I thought it was going to be just one big book to start. I didn't think of it as like a big series. I always wanted to do something like Nausicaa, but I didn't think Amulet was going to be that. So it transformed into that.
If you can indulge me for a split second.
Yeah.
I saw Nausicaa as a small child.
Mm-hmm.
And for years, I was trying to describe it to people, and everybody's like, that's not real. I'm like, no, there was this cartoon that had giant roly-polies, and there was this girl that was riding on a flying, like wing, and she had a little furry friend, and everybody's like, that's not a real thing. And it wasn't until I was an adult, I was like, there it is!
Yeah.
That's it! That's what I saw! Sorry.
Yeah. And I had that experience with My Neighbor Totoro. Because I was like 10 years old, like in Japan, like just visiting Japan, and this thing came up on TV, and I was like, what is this amazing thing I'm watching about, these two girls with these little fuzzy, like fuzzy monsters, like, and it just stayed in my mind. I was like, who made that thing? What was that thing? And then I think it was when Princess Mononoke was coming out. Like, and I saw like images of it, and I go, that looks so familiar. I think that's the guy that did that one thing. And then I saw that it was, and then I found like the bootleg copy, because you couldn't get Totoro here anywhere.
This is, by the way, guys, before the internet was everywhere.
Well, before Studio Ghibli movies were available through Disney, and it's now easy for people to get, and everyone watches them now.
Yeah.
But back then, it was like almost impossible to find. So when I saw it, I was like, what is this magical land? And I realized, this magical land exists in this man's head. And that's where I want to live. I want to live in Hayao Miyazaki's mind.
When you talk about Miyazaki's movies, they often talk about having a subtext that's there, and then like stories that aren't things that aren't being said but are definitely being felt. And do you feel that Amulet has a lot of subtext to it that people, once they get into the series, start understanding more of?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like, like even here, there's hardly any words, but all the storytelling is done through her face, right? Like, and how she's reacting. You see the environment and how she reacts to the environment. Like things like that. I mean, Miyazaki's doing that all the time. And I believe it's because he has full, complete control creatively over the product. And so everyone just follows him. And so he makes movies as if he's an author. When you're making movies in an American production system, you have to get approval for everything first. And you kind of don't know when the magic happens until it happens, but you have to tell them when it will happen before it happens, so that you can get the money. And it was always very difficult. Before all this, I actually was a director at Walt Disney Feature Animation for a little while. And it was really frustrating to be in my early 20s, so I looked like a baby. And I was there, and nobody listened to me, and nobody let me do the movie that they signed me up to do. And I realized that there was nothing I'm going to be able to do or say to get me to a place where I can go ahead and make some mistakes. And for those mistakes to be like not the mistake, the actual wonderful thing that could happen. And I realized that the only place in an American entertainment system where I could probably do that is comics.
So, because you're basically the whole studio.
That's right. I can Miyazaki my way through this. It's like the only place I can do it.
That is now a verb.
Yeah, it's true. I think creators in film know what I'm talking about when you say did you Miyazaki your way through something? Yeah. And there was a question.
Question in the back.
I know I think over the course of the books, your team got bigger because I noticed the credits at the end get a little bit longer each
Mm.
time? Like,
And then they got
do you
smaller.
feel like you were just like the big boss and you're just telling your servants what to do, or like it was a creative process of like, oh, adding these people really like added something to my story?
Yeah, I've never felt like the big boss telling people what to do, you know. Yeah, no, yeah, like, for example, like when I was in the studio too, we had to move very fast, and it had to be no nonsense. I actually set up the office so that everybody could see my screen, I can't see theirs. So all my assistants were like kind of behind me, they could see me work, and I just figured if they saw me go, they'll follow. And it worked, it was really good. So I miss having the team. Yeah, but I had to let everybody go when I was in a coma. I had bacterial meningitis and I had to learn how to walk again. People didn't know if I was gonna be present, if I was gonna be like a vegetable or not, you know? And so at that point, like, that was it. Like, the whole thing kind of dismantled. I was even making like a video game. I had the digital rights for my books, and I actually created an app for like a digital reader, which actually became some of the interface for Twitter, because the person who did that would later do that instead, and now he's retired and millionaire. I do miss that collaborative aspect of the production. In Amulet 9, the only person that did any background coloring other than myself, I colored the second half of this book myself. So I decided I was going to do it alone. I was going to end the series alone. But Jason Kufuor was with me for 15 years, you know. So we still talk, and he's probably going to work on the next thing I'm going to do. But it wasn't a huge collaborative effort. It was actually pretty solo, you know, where you're doing a lot. I had to wear a lot of hats.
You know, I've heard some people say when they have a major medical situation like that, sometimes after recovery, they either don't feel like they're the same creator they were before, or they use the creation to get back to where they were before.
Mm.
And I'm kind of curious, do you feel there's a change in your storytelling, I guess, before and after?
Yeah, well, I don't remember who I was before.
Okay, well, I mean,
so maybe
fair.
that's probably true,
Okay,
actually.
you know what, fair.
I actually don't. So, but I mean, from what I recall, I used to be a lot more worried about everything, about the success and about getting everything done. But after that event, I felt like, well, I need to spend more time with the kids. I gotta be more of a family person. I gotta be more conscientious about like the amount of work I'm doing and how fast I'd be doing it. So I slowed down, you know. So I did change in my work methods. I also felt like we're at a stage in American comics where we're kind of determining how these will be made, right? And in manga, with Japanese comics, they determined how to make those books in a way where it was very difficult for the creators. Like it's
an industry.
Oh,
well, it's not just that, it's just so hard to make manga because they're forced to work ridiculous hours. It's expected that they're gonna work 7 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day, and they're gonna just crank stuff out like all the time. And they just see it as like a badge of honor to do it. I didn't want that happening here. So I did think like, okay, I will slow down Amulet partly to set a good pace. Where the expectation then would be, if you wanted to do a book like Kazu, hey, maybe you could do it in 3 years or 5. And I wanted to see what would happen in the sales, because I think the fear was that sales would go away if you didn't do books. But in the case of Amulet, it was weird, because the sales went up. The longer I stayed away, the more the book sold.
Is it possible the audience had time to grow?
That's correct. I think to catch up to it, I think, like if you do too many books, I think you could race past your audience.
Hold on, quick question, go ahead.
What did you say the filmmaker was that influenced you on Amulet? Chris Diskowski or something?
Oh, Krzysztof Kieslowski, yeah. He's the director of the Decalogue. Like Spielberg, he's a very humanist filmmaker, so he does like very human dramas. They're very, I don't know how to, he's like Kurosawa, Spielberg. There's certain filmmakers, I'd say Ingmar Bergman is in there too.
I was actually going to ask about that one.
Yeah, I just think like they just understand the human condition and better than most people. But Krzysztof Kieslowski.
Going through traumatic events, like you were
Yeah.
saying, the woman in the car accident.
Yeah, especially the Decalogue. Like if you've seen the original, it's based on the Ten Commandments, and he did like 10 episodes. It was for a TV series, like a low-budget TV series, and each episode is about an hour long. And I would not recommend anybody watch it all at once. It will destroy you, like emotionally. But it's really, really good. Like, you know, it's really heavy.
Note to self, seek out the Decalogue. I've not seen
The
that.
Decalogue? Oh, no, you haven't seen the Decalogue. Okay.
Don't binge.
Don't binge, yeah.
Don't
Well,
binge that one.
I'll be honest, I'm not made for binging. I can't watch more than 2 episodes at a time of anything.
Yeah.
I need to, you know, so that's a whole thing.
Yeah.
But on the note of, you know, binging television, films, and also you talked earlier about productions and working with teams,
Mhm.
can you tell us how this Netflix thing got started? And if you don't mind, if you're okay telling it,
Yeah.
how's it going?
Yeah. No, I'm glad I can actually talk about it. And I'm actually glad that like I couldn't talk about it for a long time because I liked how private they kept this for so many years. I've been working on this for several years now. We started talking about it during the pandemic. And I actually, so the producer who reached out to us to make this movie was the head producer at 21 Labs Entertainment, and they just made Deadpool and Wolverine. They created Stranger Things and Arrival and Shadow and Bone.
I don't think I've heard of that. Deadpool and what?
So they're pretty they're very successful. But the time I met these guys a long time ago when Amulet was still not published, and Dan Cohen, the producer, he saw it and he's like, "Oh man, I want to make this." But at that point, they had not made anything but Steve Martin movies. I think The Cheaper by the Dozen and The Pink Panther, things like that. And we were there because my agent liked these guys a lot. They said "You've got to work with these guys. I think you guys will get along." And it's true, we got along so well. But Dan, he just looked at me and said, "I can't do this. I don't know how. You probably deserve somebody who can do special effects and all that stuff." And this is before they made Night at the Museum, which would be their first major effects-driven thing.
And a big hit.
Yeah, and then we went our separate ways for years, and I always thought, well, that was kind of a misconnection because I really like those guys and I like what they're doing. And then I was watching Stranger Things, I was like, oh man, they would have been the best people to work with. And then years later, I worked with Will Smith and his family for a while. Was trying to make it with his kids as the stars.
As a film.
For a while. And then worked with the creators of Twilight, actually, the producers of Twilight at Temple Hill. They tried to make this thing, and they just couldn't get a script together. And I wasn't working on it personally. I was just always focused on Amulet. And then during the pandemic, the rights came back to me. Fox was bought by Disney and went to Disney again. I was now working with Disney again, but Disney gave it back to me because they said we don't want to make this. So Disney passed on it. Okay, so and it came back to me, and I said to my agent, just tell everybody no until I'm done with these books because I don't want to even deal with this anymore. And then only a few weeks later, I got a phone call from my agent, and she said, okay, I know you said to leave you alone, and I have. There's been interest because they know that the rights are available. But I've said no to everybody, but he said, there's one phone call you should take. And then I asked her, is it 21 Labs? And she's like, yeah, how did you know? I was like, that is the one place I wish this was, I wished we were working with 21 Labs. And I can't believe that it's them. So I was like, yes, let's take that call.
So you remember them and they remembered you, basically.
Yes. Yeah, so we were just we should have done this a long time ago. And so I said, this time I'd like to be involved. So they made me a producer and a co-writer. And so I'm very involved in it. So I'm part of the executive team on there.
I feel like this is probably going to benefit from the fact that it wasn't made a long time ago.
That's right.
I mean, not just the special effects part of it, but also the fact that you can be involved. And to be blunt, as much as I'm not a binger, streaming does lend itself to be able to do this kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely. Plus, just in terms of the movie deal, the value of Amulet had gone up significantly since then. And so, if we made the movie a long time ago, I would have lost so much to Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers would have just owned this. They would have just been theirs, or Disney or Fox, But now, we're doing this with Netflix, And I also thought that, you know, working with Netflix might be interesting because they're not a film company, they're a tech company, and they're new, they're young. So I actually asked for, I had to make sure that I had my merchandise rights. And
The George Lucas deal.
The George Lucas deal. So I told them, like, I had like a talk with the Netflix top brass in like a Zoom meeting. And I said to them, I understand that the precedent was that you never allow anybody to have their merchandise rights or ancillary rights to the film or whatever you're adapting because of the George Lucas deal. That's what I keep hearing from everybody. They said, like, yeah, like we gave up so much, George got so much. And I go, consider how George Lucas has made so many people so much money with what he was able to retain for himself. And I just asked him, why wouldn't you want that?
I mean, you look at it from that perspective, and it's like Star Wars wouldn't have been the juggernaut that it was if he didn't have that cushion, I guess, to keep it going.
That ability to control things like that. And with the money, he like made special effects happen. Like without him, we wouldn't have all of these studios. We wouldn't even have Pixar. Pixar started as in the closet at Lucasfilm. It was literally, yeah, it was at ILM. Yeah, that's right. At ILM, it was literally in the closet. So, I don't know. I mean, like, look at, like, I think that having a bigger picture, you know, approach to it, I felt like the tech people would be willing to go with the big picture approach. And it was correct. They actually did give me those rights. And so we share the rights. So they've included me. And so I keep telling people, you just got to ask.
So what can we look forward to with this? Are we talking live action, talking animated? Are we talking CGI?
Yeah, it's currently live action, and everyone says like, oh, you know, I would like to see it animated, but animated is so close to the graphic novel that I would like people to like think of the movie and the graphic novel as two separate things.
Being different,
Yeah.
You know, I'm gonna make a weird comparison for a second. With you being so closely involved with this, wanting it to be different, it's making me think of Douglas Adams, who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy differently for a book, for a radio play, for a TV series, and he changed it because it was for a different audience.
Yeah.
Are there things that you see that, by necessity of medium, will definitely be different in the show versus the books?
Yes, in books you don't need character arcs. You can ruminate and just go wherever. Books like give you that because the audience is in control of the pace. In filmmaking, there's a lot of control that's, you know, in the hands of the creators, and so the people who are asking, like executives, always want arcs. They want like solutions. They want to see the problem, the solution, all that stuff. You know,
Talking about within episode or within
the
season,
film. Yeah, they just want to see like, oh,
By
I
the way,
want to
keep saying
see
episode. Are we talking about series? Or are we talking
No,
about
this is a movie. The
Okay,
first-
so
yeah.
ignore what I just
yeah.
said. Within the movie.
Yeah, so they just want to see like, does the character, and a lot of them are young. The executives are kind of like students of story, but they're not purveyors of story. So one thing that I have been having to do is sort of teach them like, okay, well, character arc doesn't mean the character changes. Everyone thinks that the character arc means this character changed from the beginning to the end. No. The character at the beginning is the same person at the end. It's maybe them and us realizing something about them that we didn't at the beginning. Our perception of this person changes. The perception of themselves changes, but they're the same. You know, and it's really hard to like get an executive to see that.
I use Steve Rogers as an example. Every Steve Rogers movie, he does not change. Everyone else changes for him.
There you go.
You know, everyone changes around him. The story changes, the way people view him changes, but his stance at the beginning is his stance at the end.
Sure. Yeah.
So, talking about adapting into a movie, a lot of times people will, you know, we're going to combine the first three books, or we're going to take bits of this and bits of that. Is this going to be more or less chronological, or are we just going to take everything into one film?
It's more or less chronological. It's the first movie right now. It's like the first two books plus elements of other ones later on. Just kind of, just to make it, I don't know, a little more elegant for movies. Yeah.
As a creator, does this allow you to take things that maybe you thought of later on and be like, oh, I'm going to plant those seeds earlier? You that kind of a thing?
Well, ultimately, there is a screenwriter, and he's kind of in charge of the script, but he comes to me for the guidance. So I'm more like Mr. Miyagi on this one. So there are things like I can suggest that we go and do, and I'll like just write it out and say, take it this way. I'm more of just like a character mechanic at the moment, like of making sure that the characters still feel like the ones in the books. If their motivations change because Jason Fuchs, the writer, decides he wants to go a certain way, then I tell him like, this is the reason why I didn't do that. But to save us time, like you'll probably find out what I found out. But to save us time, I'm telling you why this happened. And why don't we go back, walk that back, and then go this particular direction. He's often just addressing Netflix's desires. They want to see a certain outcome.
Yeah.
But if you force that outcome, the characters will feel wooden and they will not feel, they'll feel false. So this whole process has been me trying to find a way to like get them to come to where we are. And it's been interesting. It's been an interesting process doing that. Yeah.
Do you feel like the filmmakers are really receptive? Like the writer, the directors, the producers, they really want your input to keep it?
Yeah, there's no director yet. Yeah, so when we're working on this, like with directors, it's about timing. So who's available? Who's available in the window in which we're going to make the movie? So for right now, it's all just producers and writers. And yeah, they've been really respectful, kind. They're all fans of Amulet. They're all younger than me, which is weird.
Kids these days.
Which is weird, yes. No, they've been great. Everyone's been really good, and I feel really fortunate. It's odd for me to have. You know what? Actually, I've picked to work with nice people all the way. Like Will Smith's family, like and Overbrook Entertainment.
Yeah.
They were so wonderful. It's just it didn't work out because they had their own family stuff going on. That just didn't work with what we were doing. But I thought they were great. Everyone's great. Yeah. So far, I've only had positive experiences.
Was when you went in to create, the stuff for Amulet as you do the different volumes, were you already kind of thinking like, well, if this were in live action, this would look different or something like that, or is this just after the fact?
Yeah, no. I mean, they can kind of do whatever they want, really. Like as an editor, when I'm an editor, I never try to take control of another artist's work. I just think the best work is going to come when they put it in their hands. Like I think the best art directors I've worked with, like when I did the covers for the Harry Potter 15th Anniversary Edition, I was working with David Saylor, who designed the logo. He was the one who, hired Mary Grand Prix, and he essentially designed Harry Potter as we know him. And he asked me to do the new covers, and every time I asked David, like, well, what do you think of this? What do you think about this approach, or this way? And he almost always turned it around with, well, what do you think? What do you think? Well, that sounds good. Well, why don't you try it? What do you think? And he just kept putting it back in my hands and never letting me have an answer from him. And so I kept pushing in different directions, and then he would say, okay, that looks good. That's right. Let's go that direction. But he never directed me. And I think that a good art director doesn't direct. A good art director provides the artist the space, the support they need, and just kind of maybe a road in a direction that looks good.
On that note, let's bring this back around to what we started with, which was the anthologies. As an editor yourself, what do you do to encourage or nurture creators, whether they're brand new or whether they're experienced?
Yeah, with Flight and Explorer, there was only one really major creative decision that I could make on their stories.
Make sure everything is about flight.
Well, there's the theme. No, Flight, there was no theme. But,
I know.
Yeah. But there's only one decision I can make. I choose the person. And from then on, they had full freedom. You had like 16 pages or whatever. You fill it with what you're going to fill it with. I'll be there if you need some help and you think you would like to bounce some ideas off of me and a group of others. We'll help. But for the most part, I did not push or guide or anything like that, really. I tried not to. And then people were like, oh, wow, he's a great editor. I'm like, no, I just know what it feels like to be them. And for once, I would like to be able to write the story I want to write. And I feel that they would want that too. So I'll just give them the space and I'll defend it. And they also get to own everything. That's another thing. Like with Flight, everyone owned their content. They could take it anywhere else. And it was one of the things that was really hard to get Random House to sign up on, because like they couldn't use it as a platform for another book. They couldn't like get you to do a short story in there and then they get a chance to publish that book. They could take it to another publisher. But eventually they were okay with it. Yeah. So.
You know, you said earlier that when you brought in people for those anthologies, you saw them as the professionals, saw them as they were the big stars, right? Is there anybody that you've worked with who afterwards, you know, had more success and you feel a little bit proud of them and you were like, wow, I was part of that?
I don't feel like I was ever part of it. Like I thought like what I did, if you know, like if you look at the list of flight artists, they went on to become the industry. When I met them, they were kids just like me. So I always see it as like we just happened to be in the same space, and those were my friends, and they've done what they're gonna do, and it had nothing to do with me. Like, but we happened to be in the same road for a little while, and that's cool. So yeah, I don't know. It's cool to see it, and you know, I think other people look at it more than I do because I still feel like we're at the beginning of this. So I'm like, there's so much work to be done. I don't want to celebrate right now. Everyone's like, let's celebrate flight. I go, man, we got to get more graphic novels out there though. Like, there's just not enough middle grade graphic novels. Talk to a teacher, talk to a librarian. We are not filling the shelves right now. So like, people got to get the lead out.
I want to follow up on that in a second, but first, we do have some time for more questions, so if anybody has questions they'd like to ask, go ahead and answer.
You talked a lot about like creative influences in film and in comics. In comics, were there, the only person I can think of is Scott McCloud that you mentioned, were there like technical influences that helped you sort of figure out the structure of storytelling specifically in like sequential images?
I wish. There wasn't much, because there was nothing for graphic novels. It was all for comics. And comics aren't graphic novels. They're so much smaller, you know? I had Jeff Smith there, and he was like an uncle to me, you know, and he was very close, and he helped me a lot. But even Jeff like doesn't do graphic novels. He will often say that he has to do a periodical, like a serialized story, whether it's a webcomic or or a single issue comic. So, gosh, I had to kind of invent the way I was gonna make this thing. So I just self-serialized. So Amulet actually has chapters and no one sees them. So there's actually a list of chapters for every book. I can release the chapter names. There are names and everything. So there's about 12 to 16 chapters per book.
I just love the idea that there's chapter names that the fans have not seen.
Yeah, no one sees them except for internally, like production-wise. There's names for them. And the reason I did it in chapters is that if I change something, I don't have to change the entire thing. I can just change that sequence and swap it out. I can move sequences around. So that's the way I built it. Lately, I've been wanting to work closely with the editors on the books, because I think I developed a bit of a reputation like Miyazaki, where they're like, just leave him alone, or his agent is gonna bite our heads off. And that was starting to seem kind of true. I didn't care that they were involved, but everyone was intimidated by my process. So I wanted to like involve them more. And so I will say, like, I don't like scripting comics. So if there's one thing that I looked at as kind of a guide, I would say that it's Stan Lee's Marvel Way. And that is that I'm going to show you an essentially like kind of a synopsized version of what the story will be, so you get a sense of what you're going to see, and then when I draw it, I'm just going to go on my own. And then we'll come back and then we'll talk about the script as the dialogue that's in those pictures, as opposed to like drawing for the script. When I see somebody drawing for the script, it looks like storyboards. And comics are not storyboards. If you're a storyboard artist, you will have to undo your storyboard knowledge thinking when you do a comic book, in my opinion.
And vice versa, I imagine.
Yeah, probably. I mean, because it's you're not seeing everything in sequence. You're seeing it all at once. So you're more like a designer than you are a storyboard artist. So yeah, anyway, I wrote so I have a new book. So there's a new book with Scholastic. I have one more book to do with them on contract. And it is this dark fantasy, like, spectacle. They love it. But I wrote out basically a one-page synopsis for every sequence or chapter. So about 16 of them, like 16 pages of content that just describe what is in the scene. And then I actually have several lines that tell me what my goals were with that scene. And then I'm going to use that as a guide to draw the scene. So.
I honestly a little bit surprised to hear that. I would have thought it had been a little bit more in advance. I like the idea that you're just drawing what you feel needs to be drawn at that moment.
Yeah, so I'm trying to retain some element of like jazz play, you know? Like there has to be some improvisation so that the magic can happen. Because it's usually when I discover something, then the reader's discovering it with me, and then it's exciting. Instead of like, I discovered something, I pitched it to somebody else, now I have to try to remember what it was like when I discovered it, and then you make the thing, and then it kind of kills it over time. The reason why Miyazaki's film feels so fresh is that the point of discovery was happening as it's being animated. It's fresh, it's like freshly baked bread, you know? But in order to do that, it requires a tremendous amount of trust by everybody else. Like they gotta fully trust this guy to get you to the end. You don't know where it's going. You're just waiting for him to just do it.
On that note of just doing it, and you said earlier there's not enough, young adult graphic novels, and you were talking about, guiding people and trying to step back and let them do their work.
Yeah.
Somebody comes to you and says, I want to make a graphic novel, I've never done this before. Mm-hmm. Are there not only suggestions, but maybe warnings that you would give them?
Well, for one, I think you should try as much as you can to own the IP. Don't sell out, like with this, because you can produce the whole thing yourself. There's no reason why somebody else should take the rights to your work when you're doing it at this level. If you're making a movie or a game or something like that, you're gonna lose stuff because it costs resources to make them. But that's number one. But number two, really it's about being okay with trashing your own work. Just making so much work that you have the resource to turn it into a book. And so drawing isn't an issue, or writing isn't an issue. You're just used to drafting and redrafting and redrafting. I do kind of a minimum of 5 or 6 drafts of every sequence I do in Amulet. So
are we talking about sketched out pages? Or
yeah, thumbnails,
okay.
Thumbnail drawn pages with the writing and dialogue. Yeah. So I consider those my rehearsals. So I will just do rehearsal after rehearsal after rehearsal. So eventually, around the third one, it starts feeling okay. And usually about the 5th or 6th draft, I'm like, you know what? Even if the 4th draft is good, I will do a 5th. I will do a 6th, because there can always be a little better. And I approach it differently, and I see it differently. And then you have all these different folds of story in there that people can unlock later on. So when they read the book, not only will they read it just that once, they'll come back and they'll try to figure out how to unlock what they seem to have seen the first time through. And then they'll read it again and again. And I think that's why people watch Miyazaki's movies multiple times, or Disney movies. There's actually a tremendous amount of information baked in.
Oh, well, with that, we're about to wrap up, but I want to ask again, any final questions?
Yeah, anybody have a question?
Go ahead, there, I'm good to you.
When you're writing a bigger series split up into smaller books, when you're ready to write the next book, is your brain okay, this is the next logical series of events that the characters have to go through, or is it I want to get to this moment in this book, or this book will be focused on this message, or this character? Do you have a focus when you are ready to start your next segment?
No, because you'll also be a different person by the time you get there. And your interests will be different. One thing I try to do is try to do my best ideas at that moment and not save better ideas for later. Because you think oh, I gotta get to that one thing, right? But that's betting on the fact that, or betting on this idea that you won't have a better idea later, right? Now, if you have a better idea later, what do you do if the other better idea is not as good as the new better idea? You know what I mean? So you might as well do the best idea you got in your pocket right now, even if you think you should save it for later. Just do the best now, and then you're going to do a better one next time. So so what I do is I just, if I have a guide, I have like markers in the story. Like there's like 4 or 5 signposts I would say I have to hit. Like this has to happen in the story. Something like this has to happen. But how I get there, I don't know until I'm just in the weeds. And sometimes I just have to let the story determine what happens. And for example, in Amulet 7, the opening scene used to be Gabalin in a prison colony. Like you see that he's alive. He'd been washed up on an island. He meets this guy that kind of helps like recover him, and then he gets trapped by elves on a prison colony, and he makes like this swashbuckling escape. About 30 pages in, no Emily. This is an amazing sequence. Scholastic loves it. My assistant loves it, and I just told everybody, no. We can't be so far away from Emily. Like this is Emily's story. This is not Gabelin's story. So no matter how good this sequence is, we got to get it out of here. So I had to trash the whole thing, and just put it in the back pocket and go. That sequence happens in my head, and I'll try to draw the character as if that sequence happened, where he had the Swiss Family Robinson adventure, or Count of Monte Cristo adventure that just occurred. But like Emily has to be the focus. So I made Emily the main character. Like right from the bat, the first thing you see is her. So there are moments where it's like I have to do what's best for the book, and usually that means it's what's best for the main character. It's a real sacrifice, but it makes the book better. Yeah.
I was gonna say it almost sounds like stream of consciousness writing, but no, it's still organized and it still has thought behind it. It's not just like everything that comes up.
It's a combination.
Yeah,
There's some improvisation, there's some planning, and then you plan off of the improvisation, so you go back and forth.
Question?
Regarding your visual art, how has your style and techniques and tools changed over the years?
That's a good question. I think, how's it changed? It's gotten better. One thing I try to do is make the faces more simplistic. Like I try to make it so, like for example, I don't put as many highlights on a face. Like on the features of the face. I don't care about it as an object anymore. It's more like a plate. It's like an emoticon, like an emoji. And I have to think of it as cleanly as possible. So you'll notice like in the later books, like Emily's face looks really flat. But it's so that I can deliver the emotion better. So you'll see in the early ones there's like lighting and shading to like make them look more realistic. But it kind of kills some of the emotion. So like even in like I think Amulet 8, I went back and I just like blasted everybody's faces up, made it brighter, so it made it more like a happy face or like an emoticon. So things like that, clarifying the information that needs to get to the reader. And you'll also notice that the lettering in Amulet gets bigger, because I knew that kids were learning to read, and one thing that could deter them from reading is if the words are hard to read. So and that meant I have less space for words, so I have to be really judicious about where I put them, and be very spare with my words, word count.
Well, one last question, and then I would say make sure we meet him at his table upstairs.
Yeah, you can ask questions all you want over there.
But I'm really loving this. It's some great answers.
Yeah, it's some great questions. Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit more about storyboarding versus comics, and do you think storyboarding is more formulaic versus comic stream of consciousness, or how do you kind of defrag if you learn the storyboarding? Like, what's your process of?
Yeah, so I used to work in animation and film, and I do think from a film perspective as well. But I just think of storyboarding comics as two totally different things. Because in one case, as a storyboard artist, you are seeing a sequence of images in one string. You're never seeing the same image at the same time. Right? So the image that you just saw is no longer on the screen when you see the next one. So it's one after another, after another, after another, after another. Which is why when they say like you got to reverse shot without like messing up the positions of the characters. Like they talk about that because it's disorienting for somebody. Because you're forcing them to see it your way. Comics, you can reverse shot, do all crazy sorts of stuff all you want because the reader has control. Like you're handing that over to them. So it's more of a designed experience where they assemble a cornucopia of images, And they're actually never told that they have to read this image before this one. They choose on their own. And so one thing I do in a book is I never make a major reveal at the end of the sequence. I do it on the page, the first page, because that's the turn. Like that's the only place I can hide it, right? So like, you know, I think you would think in film knowledge, you think, oh, make sure you reveal at the end of that sequence. I'm like, no, you gotta reveal at the beginning because they're gonna cheat. Because they're gonna see this cool thing on the right and they're gonna be like, I don't care about anything that happens here now because I wanna know what that is. So I know they're seeing it that way, so I make sure that what happens is that it's like shadowy, like some question mark happens at the end of that sequence instead. Like, what is this thing? Like a shadowy figure. And then turn it, and the next page, left side, top panel, then you reveal, right? And that's so different than if you're making a film, because you always have that ability to shield them from the next image. So it's like a string of images versus a assembly of images. Does that make sense?
So like,
It's like
you hear of a lot of compulsive storyboarders like Ridley Scott, some of them, they just have to start.
Yeah.
Are they just more setting up the scene and the spatial, whereas in the comic, you're more focused on the story, the character, and like you said, that blunt first line up front, or whatever they use in the
Yeah.
picture. Like you're giving it the reveal,
Yeah.
the spoil at the beginning.
Well, in a film, like, the director is the director. In a comic, the reader is the director. I just give them the parts.
I love that way of looking at it. That's a really,
Does that make sense?
it does.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that's
Imagination.
right, but that's also why comics are really geared for younger readers. Because they are still at a stage where they want to build. When older people get older, they want to see somebody do that for them. They want to see the assembly. They want to see it like sent to them, like, serve me, waiter. The kids are like, give me the ingredients. I want to cook the meal. You know, and that's the difference, I think. And it's so to me, they're like totally different ways of telling a story. And so that's why when I see a story, I could tell immediately if it's a storyboard artist coming into my field. Because I'm like, oh, they don't get that. They're just storyboarding for, you know, the reader, you know, but they don't know. Yeah, it's it's a different. It's different.
Totally different communication.
Yeah, you're communicating through design with comics. Yeah, and in storyboarding, you're communicating like on a film, like just this box right here, you know. Yeah.
And with that thought of the graphic novels being the movies that are directed by the readers, thank you so much here for being a guest here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you guys for your questions.
Those are all really great questions, by the way. Yeah, I could do this all day. That's fun.
And he can at his table.
Oh yeah, I'll be at the table.
See you guys upstairs at 4 o'clock. There is going to be Comics Meets TTRPG. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. By the way,
There is a spike.